minimize background noise. We thank you for joining us. We know there are a lot of questions about this new program and what the distress designation means for you. We hope to answer a lot of these questions as we go through the presentation, and we've also allowed for plenty of time after the presentation for questions. So we really encourage you to speak up and ask any questions that you might have. The agenda for today will include introductions, background and history of the Viable Utility Reserve Program, requirements for local government units that are designated as distressed, next steps, and funding support availability. For introductions, we'll have the Division of Water Infrastructure staff introduce themselves. My name is Susan Kubaki. I'm a Program Development Coordinator in the Viable Utility Unit.
Hi, this is John Riscard. I'm Acting Division Director and State Revolving Section.
I am Jennifer Haney, and I am a Program Development Coordinator also, and am overseeing the outreach and education for the division as well as the liaison to the State Water Infrastructure Authority.
And good afternoon, I'm Linda Culpepper and working in the VUR support. Thank you.
For those of you joining us, we wish that we could do introductions of everyone, but I'm afraid that we would not have time for that. So we do ask that if you ask a question, please introduce yourselves and let us know which local government unit you are representing. And we will jump into some history and background on the Viable Utility Reserve Program. The State Water Infrastructure Authority was established in 2013 as the Division of Water Infrastructure was formed, and it pulled together some various funding sources for water and sewer infrastructure and housed them together in one division. When the authority was developed, there were 12 duties that were established, one of which was to create a master plan and develop a troubled systems protocol. So the Viable Utility Program has evolved out of that. In developing the master plan, we created a viability definition and identified 3 best practice areas that we'll talk some more about. And then the troubled systems protocol has grown into the Viable Utility Reserve. The legislation that directed the authority to come up with this protocol gave us some flexibility on how to do that. So we worked very hard to come up with a program that we hope will help all of the units across the state. We'll start with the definition of viability that's included in our master plan. A viable system is one that functions as a long-term, self-sufficient business enterprise, establishes organizational excellence, and provides appropriate levels of infrastructure maintenance, operation, and reinvestment that allow the utility to provide reliable water services now and in the future. We're going to talk about some specific aspects of this definition. Appropriate levels of infrastructure maintenance, operation, and reinvestment. Infrastructure, that's at the heart of the viability definition. Manage what you have, including reinvestment. Questions to ask yourself: do you know what you have? Do you know its conditions? How are you planning on rehabilitation and replacement? Establish organizational excellence. Do you have key performance indicators to measure how you're achieving your objectives? How well is your utility communicating with elected officials and with your customers? Do utility staff have training necessary to perform their duties? Do they know what their duties are? Are they aware of the key performance indicators if you have them? These are all things to be considering in organizational excellence. And finally, financially, is your system self-sufficient? Things to think about: are you building reserves? Do you get regular financial reports from your chief financial officer? Do you know how to read financial statements? Are you planning for capital projects? Are you running your system like a business? These are important questions that you need to be able to answer if you want your system to be viable in the long term. So that's how we define viability. How do we get there? We hope that our program will help you do that. The Viable Utility Program was signed into law on July 1st, 2020. To foster the viability of water and wastewater operations across the state. The legislation requires us to identify local government units that are distressed and provides a process to develop that program for viable water and sewer utilities. The legislation requires the State Water Infrastructure and the Local Government Commission, or LGC, to work together The law created the Viable Utility Reserve Fund with initial funding of $9 million. That's what we have to start with. We hope to get more, but that's what we're working with for now. The Local Government Commission and State Water Infrastructure Authority are required to work together to administer this law. The first step we had to do is identify criteria that will be used to identify systems that are designated as distressed. So we looked at a combination of financial management and operational criteria, as well as some system issues to identify these criteria. So the first way that a system can get designated as distressed is if the local government commission has formally taken control of that local government unit. The second way is if a unit has failed to submit their financial audit for 2 years in a row. And the third is looking at a total assessment criteria score where we evaluated 20 different parameters, each one having a score value of 1 to 4. So a total score of 9 for local government units that provide both drinking water and wastewater service, or a score of 8 for units that only provide one service, is considered high enough to get designated as distressed. The fourth way is allows the authority and the local government commission to use other information that is in line with these criteria, but maybe for one reason or another is not exactly reflected. It allows them to use that other additional information to designate systems as distressed. Within the VUR process, we have a couple of key dates. December 2020 is when the local government commission and the authority approved the final criteria that were used to designate systems. And then in early 2021, at different meetings, systems were designated. The local government commission designated 118 units. And then the State Water Infrastructure Authority designated units based on criteria 1 or 2, which again were those units taken over by the LGC or that failed to submit audits. And then in April, the State Water Infrastructure Authority came back and designated another 95 units under criteria 3. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jennifer Haney to talk about requirements for local government units.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be with you today, and we're going to be covering, Linda Culpepper and I, 3 main areas, as you can see here, and I'm going to be focusing more on the education component because that is the component that I'm responsible for and that you do need to be aware of. Okay, so the initial education is something that is mandatory for everyone who has been designated as distressed. And essentially, if you look in the legislation, what it says is that elected officials and utility staff are those who are mandated to come. And the way that we look at it is these are, both sets are individuals who are responsible for providing utility services. Elected officials are extremely important because you all are the decision makers related to the finances and the budgets of your water and wastewater systems. And one of the things that we want you to think about when preparing to go to this education is that we want you to have two elected officials there whenever we get that started. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So be thinking about who those 2 individuals would be for your system. A lot of times the mayors go, but that's not necessarily a requirement. A lot of times town councils and commissions will have someone who is like a water and sewer quote-unquote specialist, and those individuals may want to go. So just start to think about that, and then when we issue the call for education, make sure that they will be available. For the utility staff, it is very important to think about who is actually responsible for 2 aspects of the system. First off, the person who's in charge of finances. In a lot of situations, we would classify that person as a finance officer, but I also know that a lot of times small towns do not have a finance officer. Instead, the town clerk is the one who is responsible for the finances. So that particular person will need to come, as well as the person who is in charge of infrastructure. In the bigger towns, that would be a utility director most likely. In the smaller towns, either the town manager or administrator. So those are the 2 individuals on utility staff that we would like to see. And please do understand that the finance officer / clerk is very important because, again, they handle the finances of the system. So the initial education will be, if you think about it as like a college course, like a 100-level introductory course. And what we will be covering in that will be the basics of utility management. And then what we will do is go through the master plan best practice areas that Susan mentioned in her definition of viable utility, and cover the 3 items that you see there: infrastructure, organizational, and financial. And what we want to provide you with is first steps related to essentially what you could do when you get back to your utility within a month to be able to start moving your system in the direction of becoming solidly viable. So that's what we will be covering. It should be a fun time in my mind, whichever way you do it. There will be 2 options for this initial education. The first one will be essentially offered directly by our division. It will be in person and very interactive. Do plan on a full day, which would be 6 hours of instruction with lunch breaks. And that will be something that will be a lot of fun. We will have table groups where we will talk about, items within tables and also with the full class. And what we do plan to do is to bring this training to you. So we hope that the drive will not be very long wherever it is. This will be open to any distressed local government unit. Please do be aware that if you do decide to apply for funding from this program, you will need to attend this training. And then we aim to start this in the late summer and fall. And that is because essentially what we have to do is get approval for this education program from our State Water Infrastructure Authority. And then once that will happen on July 14th, and once we get that approval, then we will be moving forward with this. There will also be a second option by the NC League of Municipalities. I hope that many of you are members of this organization. They provide wonderful support for you in many different areas beyond utilities. And they have a program that's called Advanced Municipal Leaders Training. And this training is on-demand training, so it's online. From what I understand, it is a go at your own pace kind of training. And what we will ask you to do is complete a series of modules. It will roughly follow the modules we'll be doing in the in-person training. And then we will also, at a certain point, probably later in the fall, have a webinar discussion. And this will be available to everyone. We're hoping in the fall of 2021, we are still coordinating with the league on that. So we will be sure to keep everyone in the loop as far as this training. So another part of the education goes beyond the initial education, and this will be part of, if you look in the regulations, it's part of your long-term financial plan. And continuing education is something that needs to be a commitment to you. And when I say commitment, it's just not the commitment of elected officials and utility staff to attend training, but also to make sure that you put funding for that training within your annual budget so that that you can go to this training. And this is still forming up. And I've started seeing some ideas that are floating across. And what we will want you to do is elected officials and utility staff will need to attend one training a year. It may be different training. Maybe it's something aimed at utility staff more than elected officials. It may be something related to board training for elected officials. And we're going to put them in break it out again into, if you would, the college level kind of classes, like 200 level classes would be second steps. And when I mean second steps, it would be like, okay, I have an asset management plan. What do I do with it? Or I want to look at the potential of regionalizing. What are some basics related to that? And then the 300 and 400 level classes, we envision to be more in-depth. You're taking a deeper dive into specific topics. And these trainings will mainly be available with the resource agencies. And again, this is under development, so stay tuned. And we will hopefully be able to provide more information in the future.
Okay, this is Linda, and I'm going to just do a little bit of a sound check here. We saw that note. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, do keep in mind sometimes that it may be the internet where things can get fuzzy.
Yep. And we were also trying to get Vanceboro, the town of Vanceboro, logged in. I'm not sure if they've had a chance to log in yet or not. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and I also am remiss that when we were doing introductions, we didn't give a chance for Vic D'Amato to introduce himself. I don't know, Vic, if you want to unmute for a second.
I can.
Okay. So Vic
Hello?
is our...
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I had some audio problem. Yeah, I'm the supervisor of the Reliable Utilities Unit, and I'm in my approximately third week, so relatively new, but catching up to speed. So welcome, everyone.
Great, thank you. And Ann Cutler, Ann's with the Local Government Commission. I didn't know, Ann, if you'd want to just say hello to everyone.
Hi there, this is Ann. I'm having some issues myself with the sound, so I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep, no, you came through loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay.
That sounds great. Well, the area I'm going to be talking about is some of the studies and the short-term and long-term action plans. So we just kind of want to give you the lay of the land. Susan's already talked about funding, and John Risgaard's going to spend a little bit more time talking about the funding that's available for some of the study work that's required by the General Assembly, by the statutes. And so it's those units that were designated as distressed. They're required to do an asset assessment study as well as a rate study. And some of you may have already conducted one or both of these studies in the past. As we're talking to utilities, we're finding out they've done some of the, and I'll use the term AIA, that's the Asset Inventory and Assessment. So some utilities have done AIAs for maybe a particular part of their utility area. They may not have done a whole comprehensive study of their system. And there's funding available, and that's what we're asking folks to do, is to look at, even if they've already done an AIA, to look at if there's any gaps and make sure that they have a full assessment done on the whole utility. The AIA, it provides you that information about your equipment. You're looking at those pieces of equipment that are above ground and below ground. You're looking at what you have, where it is, where it's located. You're also looking at the condition it's in and the criticality that you might be supplying water to a hospital or to a school, and it has different critical components to it. And the AIA is a way to gain that information, ideally in a GIS format, so you can look at it and see where you have different areas you may want to do project work, and prioritize what the needs are and what needs attention first. So that study is going to help develop that information for you, and then you're going to be able to use that information as you start or enhance short and long-term plans that you will have in place. And if you're considering to work with others in regional efforts, you're going to need that locational information and also the condition of what your water lines or maybe your wastewater collection system, the manholes, the pumps. You're going to want to know the condition and location of all of that, in addition to what some folks traditionally think their utility is, maybe the wastewater treatment system itself or a water treatment system. But the photos, if I could, John's telling me I need to go faster. So the photo at the top right is showing how roots and all can permeate into that's into a wastewater collection system. And down below it's showing you a series of photos there. And the idea is to illustrate that you can have areas or gaps or holes in the system where you could have inflow or infiltration of water. So it's like stormwater entering into the system. It gets into your wastewater collection, and then your wastewater system, or if you send your wastewater to somebody else to treat, you're having to pay for all that, we call it I&I, the infiltration and inflow. You have to pay for that to be treated, and there's nobody there to bill. I mean, that's just coming in through your system, through a manhole or through some other protrudence into the system. So it's an expense with no revenue for it. So this AIA is a way to do this closed-circuit TV camera work to look at what inside the lines. Okay, thank you, John. So this is an example of why the I&I, that inflow and infiltration, is so important. This is a report from a system where their monthly I&I was twice the amount of the water that their system had an average use of. So there was a significant amount of money being spent unnecessarily on this inflow and infiltration. So it has a significant fiscal impact for a lot of utilities. So that information you would get from an AIA and also the rate study that's required is going to help you develop or enhance, if you already have, short-term action plans. And for right now, we've defined the short-term plan as 2 to 5 year horizon. And so you're looking at that information, and this short-term plan, you would have those milestones in there to conduct the AIA and rate study, to what extent needs to be done for your utility. And every utility is different, and we appreciate that. And that's why these short-term and long-term plans, they really should be tailored to what your needs are for your community. No two communities are going to be alike. So you want to look at also those training opportunities for training and education. And as Jen said, you want to set aside funds to make sure it's available if there are costs associated with them. And as you're looking at your short-term and long-term plans, you want to put in there your repair, maintenance, and management of your utility system so that you know what anticipated costs are coming up. And that kind of leaves that last bullet there in that first grouping, developing the long-term financial management. You want to make sure that you have revenue coming in to cover that operation and maintenance. Also, adequate number of personnel. That can be evaluated to make sure that you have the right staff in the right areas. And then reinvestment, making sure that you have a capital improvement plan for long-term replacement. So we're going to focus first on addressing the flags that came up in that criteria in the assessment for becoming distressed. And you want to look at things that you can influence and change on. So this is a compilation. I didn't pull up anybody's individual scores here for the assessment that led to the designation for a lot of folks. So it's not pinpointing any one town or any utility, but just to take a look at it, you know, something like service population, you probably don't have a lot of control over. But at the same time, you have to manage that. If you have a declining or increasing population, you've got to be prepared for that. And by using the short-term and long-term plans, you're hopefully building in that resiliency as your trends are changing. Same thing with transfers in to your utility account. If you're having to supplement it from your general fund, you want to take a look at that, and that's probably something you have more control over than some other aspects. Another area we're seeing a lot of concern is in that green area under the financial points, and it's the percentage of depreciation. So it's how old your equipment is. So anything over a 50% threshold has got folks, utilities, a point towards that distress designation. And that's because we need to make sure that as the infrastructure is aging, that you have adequate resources to pay for potential replacement that's coming in the near future. Okay, thank you. So the short-term plan, here's some questions we suggest that you ask yourself, looking at how to manage your infrastructure, making sure you understand the inventory of equipment that you have replacement protocols in place, making sure from an organizational standpoint you have those job descriptions and performance reviews in place to make sure you're putting the right investment in your personnel, and that you have good communication, as Jen mentioned, between the board and the staff members and the level of service that you're expecting. And then on the financial aspects, are you enforcing your collection policies? Are you talking about the finances regularly at your meetings? Are you beginning to set aside funds for capital improvement? All of those are important conversations to have. So in the long-term plan, it's a lot of the same thing, but looking at that 10-year and beyond horizon. And so you're going to have information, too, from your AIA and your rate study. And if you're doing a merger regionalization or looking at alternatives, you're going to have information to plug into this 10-year vision and beyond. And you're going to continue to look at those educational opportunities. And again, that long-term financial management plan, that's really essential. So you continue to look at the key criteria as well. So here's some of the questions that can help you as you're designing that long-term plan, making sure that you're developing and implementing that capital improvement, looking at those key performance indicators, reporting to the board, and looking at the consistency and seeing are you doing incremental rate increases as well for the financial aspects. So on that financial view, you want to make sure everybody's rowing in the same direction. Looking at your revenues, making sure they're exceeding expenses, not just meeting expenses. Again, those conversations on capital planning and making sure that you're reporting your finances to the local government commission in a timely manner, and setting aside money for capital planning and emergencies. When emergencies happen, you can this cost skyrocket. The more you can do to maintain your system up front, the better off you're going to be from a financial standpoint. And I think that's meant for me. John?
All right. Well, this is John, and we got through that material very quickly. Just to wrap things up here, I'm going to go a little bit off script. But I'm going to be talking about our responsibilities as a division, get into a little bit on what are some of your responsibilities in order to meet statutory requirements. We've talked a lot about that already, so it's just more rehashing of some of the things that Susan, Jennifer, and Linda went over. And then I get to talk about funding, which is there's some really good news, I think, in some funding opportunities in the future, and I'm sure you're going to be interested in. Especially considering that this is a new program that includes statutory requirements for all of you, and it's not necessarily clear that there's funding to support all of that need. We think it's getting there, but I'll give you more details when I get into that part of the presentation. So first off, what are the responsibilities of the division? We have a lot going on in developing this program, but ultimately our responsibility is to serve all of you and help you get through this process and get you to a point where you have a long-term viable utility. And that's what we're trying to do. We're currently building our team. We have a new viable utilities unit, viable utilities program that Victor D'Amato is heading up. Susan, Jennifer, Linda are part of that team. We're looking to hire some new staff. And really have a really strong team to support all of you. Because this is going so fast, we don't always have all of the answers on how it's going to work. We're figuring it out as we go, and we're also working with the State Water Infrastructure Authority and the Local Government Commission to try to make it as smooth as we can. We're trying to be reactive, but we're also trying to be proactive to meet your needs as best we can. So, what are some big dates? Well, upcoming local government commission and authority meetings in July. We will be taking a priority system for approval that will open funding opportunities to the rest of the distressed systems. Currently, only communities that were taken over by the local government commission and systems working with them are eligible for funding. After these meetings, we hope to expand that and have more of you eligible for the funds, and there will be funds to do study grants. During these meetings, we should also get approval for our initial education component. This is part of that. This is kind of an onboarding orientation meeting, but as Jennifer said, there's a lot more to that. It'll be more catered to you and more comprehensive of education and component, and give you more opportunity to talk with our staff and some of the other resource agency partners that we have, just to give you the support that you need. Launching of the initial education component, as Jennifer said, we're targeting the late summer, August timeframe for that. We have to get it approved by the authority and the commission first, but it's really forming up nicely. It should be ready to go. Similarly, training for how to do applications and how to get your name in the hat for funding. That also will be July, August timeframe. We have a viable utility webpage, part of the division's webpage. We'll certainly be using that to get more information out to you. Also, if you're part of the water listserv, we'll be using that as well to try to keep everybody up to date on what guidance material is available and when applications become available for funding. We're planning on trying to coordinate application cycles with our regular SRF, CDBGI, AIA funding rounds, so that we can leverage all of the funds for our projects and get you guys the best funding available for your projects. Also, contact by project managers as we develop a viable utility team. The plan is to have project managers assigned to the different distressed units so you have a point of contact to work with, and that our staff can establish this schedule or frequency just to kind of check in on you and see how you're doing, provide any assistance that we can, et cetera. That should happen hopefully this summer. We have started a lot of these different steps already with some of those systems that have been taken over by the local government commission. So we're working through with them, putting applications together, some of the at least onboarding portions of the education. We've had community meetings. So we're kind of working this out with those communities, as well as potential regional partnerships for those systems that were taken over by the local government commission. And so we're really trying to learn from those experiences to make it as smooth as we can for you. All right, some of your responsibilities. This is a statutory requirement, so there is an expectation for you all to move through the process. There are not stipulated timeframes, and we kind of like that because it gives you some flexibility to do this kind of at your own pace. We're going to have incentives, or we hope to have incentives built in so that it becomes easier to get funding as you work through the process. And there may even be some eligibility requirements for capital projects that you have short-term, long-term plans in place, or at least some level of planning to show that those capital projects will get you to a viable system in the long run before those funds would be approved and awarded. Complete the initial education process. As soon as we roll that out, we encourage you to get involved and help us get those set up and get the appropriate people in the room to have that education and have those conversations with our staff. As Jennifer said, we're partnering with other resource agencies to try to create a catalog of courses for you and your board members, so that throughout the year you can key into and be aware of different education opportunities and keep making sure that you're aware of all the different steps in the viable utility program and the different components that we're asking you to do, so you can use them to the best of your abilities to help your system. Please start working on a short-term action plan. Linda kind of outlined a framework for what that could look like. We'll have more guidance available on our website, hopefully sooner than later. This is something that you really can do on your own without division support. What can you do to address some of those criteria that were in your assessment score? When was the last time that assessment work has been done, and when is it feasible for you to do that? Those are all components of the short-term action plan that really you can start laying out on your own. And that'll get you ready to apply for funding when you become eligible. A little bit more on that on the next slide, I believe. But that should be sooner than later, when you'll at least be eligible to start the studies, asset inventory assessment rate studies, and alternative analysis to some degree. The more ready you are to do that, the better. We hope that the prioritization will be based on your assessment scores, or you're partnering with somebody that has a higher score. Again, we want to focus the funds on those most in need, and using the assessment score, we feel is a good way to prioritize funding. Another thing that we feel is very important is to keep your elected official boards apprised of the VUR process. And I'm going to broaden this and make sure your whole utility team is apprised of the VUR process and are working together to meet statutory requirements, but also making sure that you are creating a long-term vision viability for your utility. We really need everybody to be working together on this and communicating, so we recommend having this be a recurring item in your board meetings, or having some other recurring meeting so that the board and the utility staff are communicating and know where you are in this process. All right, funding. Can't remember. Somebody mentioned we have $9 million non-recurring funds. Certainly that's not enough to meet the needs for all of the distressed communities we have. It's probably not even enough just to get through the study portion of the statutory requirements, and we recognize that. But that's one of the reasons why only studies are being prioritized for funding at this time. The amount of funding in the program depends on our annual budget. Currently, there are not additional funds in the governor's budget for the Viable Utility Reserve. That certainly could change with the Senate and House budgets. However, with all of the American Rescue Plan funds that seem to be flowing towards utilities, we're not really expecting more funds for the Viable Utility Reserve at this time, but we continue to pitch and hope for recurring funds soon, if not this fiscal year, hopefully the next fiscal year. We've talked about funding prioritization already a little bit. Currently, Category 1 has been approved by the authorities and the commission, and that is to allow funding to systems that were taken over by the local government commission or communities working with them. Category 2 was out for public comment the last month. That's now closed, and we are preparing our recommendations for the State Water Infrastructure Authority that would allow funding prioritization to all distressed communities. It kind of looks at different ranges of assessment criteria scores, and I think it's 3 different tiers or buckets of prioritization. If you're in that bucket, we'll fund as many projects as we can of that highest tier until we run out of money, and if we can fund all those, we'll go to the next one. American Rescue Plan. This is very much under development on how it's all going to play out and how that money is going to flow. But there's a tremendous amount of money coming to North Carolina to support water and wastewater infrastructure. Many of you already have received, or likely are going to receive shortly, some direct appropriations as part of this. We encourage you to consider using that money for infrastructure, water and wastewater infrastructure. There's a lot of approvable or allowable uses for that fund but we certainly encourage you to consider using those for your infrastructure needs. There's another pot of money that is likely going to flow through a state agency, potentially the water infrastructure, for supporting water and wastewater infrastructure. The governor's budget has been released. It's a proposal only, and it was $800 million of grant funding flowing through the Department of Environmental Quality. There is a lot of promising things in that proposed budget. It does use the term and call out funding specifically for distressed and at-risk communities, and the at-risk communities would be using the assessment criteria scores and service populations to create that universe of eligibilities. The proposal was 100% grant for distressed communities and a 25% match requirement for the at-risk communities. It was silent on what the match would need to be. We are confident, though, that your direct appropriations of the ARP money would be eligible for that match. So with the SRF program, or really any other funding that you could get on your own, other than the American Rescue Plan funding, could be used for the match. That's what we're pitching. So that is still very much dependent on a final budget. The Senate is in their budget negotiations now, and a Senate budget is expected in the next couple weeks. Once that happens, then the House goes through their process. So we're still a ways away from a finish line of knowing how much money is going to be available to fund water and wastewater infrastructure, who would administer those funds, and any state-imposed requirements that may go with those funds. But please be listening and paying attention to that. We will get information out to you. As we know, certainly the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office, NCPRO, is taking a very proactive approach of getting information to all of you on what is an allowable use of your direct appropriations, and we hope to feed them information on direct infrastructure funding as well, so that they can help with that education or marketing, if you would, of how those funds can be used. And I just want to talk about our other funding programs as well. As I mentioned, our plan is to try to tie this into an application round with our SRF program, and to potentially use that as match money or use that as additional funding source for projects. We do recognize that the SRF program is mostly a loan system, and you may not be eligible or in a position to take on a loan. There are some principal forgiveness available with that program, and then there also is an additional $10 million of recurring state funds that is typically awarded as grant funds. Those two would be made available all at the same time, prioritized to projects, and awarded to try to make the best funds available to you and your projects based on priority ranking. So, who are the best people to contact for additional information? You'll have these slides, or you may have them already, so you have this contact information. I am not on there, that's okay, because there's plenty of names. I will mention Kristen at the bottom. She's our newest engineer in the group. She starts on Monday. But that's the beginning of our team and beginning of our project managers. So please, at this time, you can reach out to anybody on this list, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as they come to mind. And I think that's all we have. So I will open it up to questions from you. I will mention, those of you who are savvy with WebEx, on your participant list, you can raise your hand, If you would do that, we'll call on you one at a time, and if and when that breaks down, then you can just unmute and ask your question when you come to mind, and we'll just do the best to manage that as we can. So first, try to raise your hand if you can figure that out.
Yeah, if you go to reactions, which is down in your toolbar there where your start video unmute is, you'll find a little smiley face with a plus on it. And if you click on that, you'll see your raise hand feature. Looks like we have someone. Hold on just a second. If you want to go ahead and ask your question, sir. I do not see it on my screen, so you'll just have to ask your question. I'm sorry. Hold on just a second. We're going over, scooting over. We have like multiple computers here that are kind of host/co-host. It was a commissioner I saw. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Other questions? Y'all don't be shy because chances are really good that if you have a question, someone else does as well. So,
Hello?
yes.
Hello, this is Ernell Brown in Hereford. Will this presentation, will you email this to us? Will we get a copy of this presentation? Okay.
Yes, I am going to, after I get back to my desk, I am going to go ahead and email the slide deck to everyone, and we do encourage you when you have your council meetings to share this information. This is certainly available to everyone, and we will also be posting a recording of what DEQ actually has a YouTube site where we are posting videos, etc. So this will be available probably next week. And I will be sure to send the link to everyone when it's posted up.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, for something else that I wanted to note, both Sarah Collins of the League of Municipalities and I posted the link to the Local Government Commission calendar for their meetings. And as Sarah mentioned in her message in chat, those information related to the meetings are generally posted a week ahead of time, as well as any kind of links. So do be aware that that is out there. I suggest before you leave this meeting that you click on that link and bookmark it. It is definitely an interesting meeting. I have sat in on them a few times myself, so it is out there for your listening whenever you want to. And another thing I wanted to mention about the education is that the in-person that the division will be offering will be free of charge. The only thing that we will be doing is having lunch on your own, essentially, so travel and lunch would be about the only expenses. I did want you to be aware of that. Any other questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is the town of Bath, and we've been working and meeting with a number of people, and I'm just curious if we might have access to John to speak privately with him after the session is over with.
I have a 3:30 commitment, but we should have a few minutes.
Yes, 5 minutes max, John.
You want to send me an email or give me a phone number?
Let me give you a phone number right now while I have this group here available. It's 252-947-0237. And that's here in the town of Bath, and we won't take up other people's time at this point.
Okay, I'll call you when we're finished.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? We like questions. I know y'all probably have a lot. Okay, well, we will go ahead and end it right now. we thank you for participating. It's really good. I think we had almost everyone here, so thank you very much. And again, look for the slide deck by the end of the day. And I do encourage you again to head back to your towns and discuss this with your council members, with your utility and finance staff. I think it's a good opportunity for everyone. So thank you again for coming, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody.